Welcome to Watches with Dennis, and today I want to give some first thoughts on Studio Underdog's new 02 series that's been revealed, which is their collection of field watches. Studio Underdog got a lot of attention with their 01 series of chronographs, and so I think a lot of people have been greatly anticipating seeing what newly would be unveiled from Studio Underdog, and they've done something new, quite a bit different, and I think a lot faster than many of us assumed would be the case. But let's go ahead and discuss these four $900 watches that are going to be available as of November 1st, 2023 for pre-order. There are four colorways, all creatively named: Pink Lemonade, Steffany Blue, Full Moon, and Midnight. All of these watches are 37 millimeters in diameter, are 46 millimeters lug to lug, are 12 millimeters thick, and have a lug width of 18 millimeters. The cases are stainless steel, with closed case backs and 100 meters of water resistance. The watches come equipped on leather straps and are powered by the Sellita SW210-1. That is a manual wind-only movement that beats at 4 Hz, has 19 joules, and offers approximately 42 hours of power reserve. These are not limited edition watches, but as I noted the $900 price point and the pre-order process beginning on November 1st, Studio Underdog has declared that for the first 500 watches, the guaranteed delivery date is before Christmas of 2023, so obviously the suggestion is after that 500 count. It's a question as to when you will actually receive your watch. Superluminova is used on these watches, but in a very creative way. It's actually the entire base dial that is loomed, and the application of that loom looks different depending on which of the four color schemes you go with. I should note, actually, the Midnight colorway is not the base dial that is loomed, but rather a more traditional approach where the Arabic numerals are loomed instead. There's a sapphire disc that's mounted above that base dial, and that is where the numerals and branding are printed. And you can see how that's affixed via the two screws that appear near the 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock positions. The watches are time only with a central seconds. Okay, so with the specifications out of the way, I'm really of mixed feelings on these watches. Just like with the 01 series, I'm really impressed with the color schemes, and in that regard, I am drawn to these, even though the field watch format isn't a personal favorite of mine. I do enjoy the playfulness that these are going for with that format. However, I am stumbling over several of these dial decisions. I think the one that's going to stand out to many people, and definitely does to me, is the decision to put this sapphire disc with the Arabic numerals, with the company branding, and go with the decision to mount it with two very obvious screws. Yes, there's a symmetry to them. Hopefully, when people actually get these watches, the screw heads will be aligned like they are in all the promotional photos I've seen. Otherwise, it's going to be an OCD person's nightmare. But regardless of that aspect, it's very, very odd looking. They've done the best they can with them, but I'm not sure it's good enough for a lot of potential buyers. I understand that these watches come in at a much lower price point than what we would see out of Ming, but I can't help but think about Ming and, for example, the 1709, where their strategy in order to get this sort of floating look to the indices was to actually etch them on the underside of the protective crystal and then fill them with loom. Thus, because it's actually attached at the bezel because it's part of the standard sapphire crystal, there was no need for mounting hardware. I'm assuming Studio Underdog wanted to go for this more 3D effect by having the numerals float, because otherwise there's no reason why they couldn't have just gone with the Superluminova base and then painted on or applied the numerals to that base after that coating process, or worked around it in some other capacity. I do think that the floating numerals are kind of cool looking, but I don't think that's the key thing that really sets this watch's aesthetic apart. Maybe for some it does. I think for some it will probably bother them that these numerals can throw shadows and float. We aren't used to seeing a lot of floating numerals. Perhaps the logic was that it'd be easier to read the numerals if they were actually floating above those loomed dials. I don't know, but I think it's definitely going to be a polarizing decision for the screws, if for no other reason. I want to go ahead and also dive in a little bit on the rest of the printing on the sapphire disc that floats above the base dial, because it's okay, but it's not great in my view. Obviously, the Studio Underdog font is going to be a love it or hate it sort of thing. I do think the decision to list assembled in Great Britain is also a love it or hate it thing. It takes up a lot of dial space, so I can't just set it aside as I often would with Swiss made, where you can barely notice it or they drop it down lower. This is in a fairly prominent position on these watches. not extending down into the chapter ring, but instead really being prominently at the base of the 6 o'clock and spreading all the way in terms of Great Britain to the 5 o'clock position. Also, in some of the photos, it looks to me that there's more space between the assembled in towards the 7 than there is between the Great Britain to the 5, and so it looks a little lopsided. That might be more a question of angles, though. But again, FYI for those who have OCD about such things, about balance, go ahead and take a look and be sure that you're comfortable with how that's laid out. And finally, above the 6 o'clock position where it says mechanical and hand winding, what a pointless label to put on a watch. There's no reason for it to say both of these things. It could have just said hand winding if you were insistent that it had to say something. Or you could have just left it at mechanical. I don't know. I think it's a miss. I think it was a state of the design team feeling like they just had to have text there and it couldn't have just been blank. And I think they could have taken a page out of Moser and done a less is more. Overall, it's kind of hard for me not to get a lot of Timex Indiglo vibes out of these watches, with the Studio Underdog watches coming in at $800 more and better coloration of the dials, but otherwise poorer choices of font and balance. But those are my first thoughts on the 02 series collection from Studio Underdog. What are yours? Do you really like these field watches? Which one of the colorways do you like the best? I guess I should go ahead and throw out in terms of mine. I would say that the pink lemonade is my favorite one, because if I was going to go for something like this, I might as well go for the one that I feel is full on the best in creativity, probably followed by the Steffany Blue. But anyway, give your comments below on what you think about this watch. But other than that, if you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like. Subscribe if you want to be notified when I have new videos. And if you want to further support the channel, there's a link in the description to join the 99 Cent Club. I hope you all have a really good day. Take care.